and welcome to Sippin on Country. Today we have Vinnie Ciesielski.
Excellent.
There you go. I nailed it, guys. I was so worried about that. Trumpet player here in Nashville, studio, touring. You have, I wrote down, I'm going to reach here. I wrote down a whole list of names because this guy has you have played with everyone. You have recorded with a ton of names. I'm just going to throw a few out there while we're sitting. We have Lynyrd Skynyrd, Queen Latifah, Taylor Swift, Springsteen, Carrie Underwood, Vince Gill, Zac Brown Band. To name, that's just a handful. This is a handful of them. So, yeah, I mean, tell us a little bit about you and kind of how you got started. How'd you end up in Nashville?
I've been first of all, I've been very lucky, but Beth can tell you, who's here behind the camera, my beautiful wife. I practice a lot. So, I started trumpet when I was 9 years old. My first trumpet teacher never told me it was hard. Al Carroll, thank you, Al. He's not, I don't think he's living anymore, but, and then just kind of, I did junior high and high school and marching band and went to college and had no idea how to get from there to where I wanted to be. One of the stories I love to tell is and you probably did this too, although you did it with different technology. My dad had a cassette player. And I had a cassette player. And so I would take these duets and trios from my trumpet books and I would play into one. And then, so I would count it off 1, 2, 3, 4 and play. Then I would hit stop, rewind, play that one, record both of them into the second cassette. And so I was multi-tracking when I was 9 years old. I just had no idea what I was doing.
Right.
I remember the first time I heard Chicago, the band. I was in the bus going to school. It was alive again, and I heard these little da-da, da-da, and I said, man, that's a trumpet. I wonder how they do that. So I was intrigued with it from a very early age. Went to college, bummed around Baltimore playing in an R&B band, and then moved to Nashville because the first thing you think of when you think of Nashville is trumpet.
Right.
And I was encouraged to do it, but I just couldn't figure out, I watched a TV show that was being produced at the time. And I thought, man, I could do that. And I got here and I was like, where's my TV show? I'm kind of still waiting for that one. But got really, really lucky at the time. And I had a gig when I first got here on the General Jackson, floating up and down the Cumberland River, playing a show, and subbed out. Got my first tour at the end of that year with Shelby Lynn, opening up for Kenny Rogers, and then started doing sessions. And it's been an amazing and incredible ride since then. Just like a lot of really super cool stuff that I never dreamed of when I was a kid. If I could go back and tell myself what I would be doing now, I would have punched myself in the mouth because I was a liar. But it was just been really, really cool.
I mean, making the move to Nashville as a trumpet player did you kind of have roots in country music? Was that partly why you wanted to be here? Or was it purely someone's like, hey, just go to Nashville?
Yeah, well, I was in Baltimore at the time, and the scene up there, it's a great town, but it just, I saw the finiteness of that scene. I was working in an R&B band 5 nights a week and kind of barely scraping by, and I thought I can at least do that there. I know there's all different kinds of music because of what I had seen and what I had heard. So I've done a lot of country and a lot of old school, like Tanya Tucker and Reba, and I guess Winona's old school now. That all that stuff in the 90s. Just got lucky to get called to do that stuff. But then Nashville is a bit more than, as you know, is a bit more than country. And so, the Skynyrd thing, rock and roll, Bad Company, and then all the way up through a huge part of my career has been contemporary Christian and gospel, black gospel music.
Okay.
And it's just, that is my favorite stuff because it's higher, faster, louder on the trumpet, and it really features the horns. And I came up under the godfather of gospel horns, a fellow named Lloyd Berry, who's still really carving away at his craft, and he is a big reason why I've enjoyed the career that I have. Really, really incredible. So the country thing was, it's funny, you've probably heard that story about the Grand Ole Opry when Big Jim Horn, who's a saxophone player, was on there, I think with John Denver. And Porter Wagner said, we're not going to let them bugles on stage here, boy, or something to that effect. And so it's been it's been really interesting having done the Opry a bazillion times too, just being on there and kind of being allowed into that country thing.
Right.
Most recently, just did some dates in New York with John Party.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and he and the band and the crew, everybody, so pro, so great, and John's a hoot to hang out with. He's very accessible, which is different as an artist. Like if you want to go up and say, "Man, I had a great time," he's like, come on in, let's have a whiskey and we'll talk about it. So we did a Christmas record for him last year,
Nice.
and did some dates in New York, which was just fantastic. So it's like a full circle thing. The studio's really busy, the band's really busy. It's wonderful.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously saying when you think of Nashville, you do not automatically go Nashville trumpets. To be honest, Nashville and any sort of wind instrument, right? It's
Yeah.
guitar, even piano is a little.
Yeah, well, right.
But I mean, I guess there's pros and cons to that, right? Because I would assume there's not a huge amount of seasoned players in town doing that. So the pool is a lot smaller to pick from, which is great for you because not only are you already kind of mastering your craft, but you've got all these opportunities open when people do need that. You're the person they call.
It was definitely like that when I came here. Excuse me. It was definitely like that when I came here. There was a handful of guys, really incredible world-class players that were carving out a living just in the studio.
Okay.
Matter of fact, when I first came, it was kind of a no-no to tour if you wanted to be a session guy.
I've actually heard that. One of my other guests was talking about this same thing, and I think he said that he ended up actually going out with Reba for 6 weeks, and the whole time he was out, people would be like, "Oh, can you do this session?" He's like, "Oh, actually, I'm booked. Like, I've already got a session booked."
Yeah.
He's like, because he did not want to tell people that he
No.
was on tour because he was like, that would stop me from getting work, which is wild.
Well, it's a bit different now. A lot of the guys that were really hard about not going out on the road are now going out on the road because a lot of the artists the pay scale has actually come up. Sessions have kind of stayed the same. They've gone up through the union, 5 or 10% every couple of years, but the salaries on the road can get pretty good. So you can do that. I was kind of a rebel because I was broke. And I was like, I'll just take whatever comes in. So I went on the road, and I would fly back on a Monday or a Tuesday. Do a session, and then fly back out to the road, even if I lost money,
Right.
to keep the account. But as far as the players go, now with Nashville kind of being the it city, there's so many more great players and so many more young players that are coming up and really sounding really, really great. And I've always encouraged people to move to town because I don't think you can take anything from somebody who is established.
Right.
It's very rare that happens. Like, a new guy in town is going to come into town and go, I'm ready for sessions, you know what I mean? And it just doesn't work that way.
Right.
But there's such a great group of still older guys that are playing, complemented by a bunch of younger guys that are really, really incredibly talented. So, more and more people are coming where they used to go to LA or they used to go to New York or Chicago. They're coming to Nashville.
Interesting.
All the video game stuff, a lot of TV and film stuff is happening here. And of course, all I do is records. I mean that's not, you know what I mean? That's
Right. Yeah.
that's what I'm recording.
Okay.
Occasionally a little bit of stuff for TV, a little bit of stuff for film, but people call me to play on their records. So I feel really lucky.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you say so? The majority of your career has it been studio session work?
At first it was live, and then it was live and studio, and more recently, in the last 10 years or so, it's been the majority of studio. But my last big road gig was with Martina.
Okay.
She did a R&B record, and we did it over at Blackbird. We were just talking about
Nice,
Blackbird earlier. And it was a great record and an incredible band. Again, an incredible crew, really pro. John McBride comes out and mixes front of house. You just can't. There's nobody better in the world than that guy. And that was really good. We were supposed to do it for 4 months, and we wound up on the gig for 2 years.
Wow.
Did like 180 or 200 dates over two years, and so Weekends, leave on Thursday, come home on Sunday. That's kind of the country thing.
Yeah.
Unless you're going out west, and then you do 2 or 3 weeks out west, and you come back home. So, it's and we did sessions on the road. My buddy Tyler Summers, who's a saxophone player, Canadian, did a Grammy-winning record for Kirk Franklin, who is a contemporary gospel artist, in the back of a fifth wheel at a rodeo.
Wow.
The bedroom of a fifth wheel, he was like sitting on the mattress with the microphone in front of him, laying down all these saxophones. He and Phil Lassiter. Phil had done the trumpets and sent them to him. And we were there for like maybe 2 days, and he was nowhere to be found for. He was just there for 24 hours a day, recording 5 or 6 songs on this record in the back of a trailer.
That's
hysterical.
wild.
Yeah, crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and he's got the Grammy on his wall for it, the certificate. So
It's a story to tell, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the mix of country. That's the best mix of country, because we were there to play at the rodeo, and R&B that you can get. We would go on stage and play with Martina on all of her country hits and all of the R&B hits, and he would go back into the trailer and play this super funky gospel thing. It was remarkable, super cool.
But it really just goes to show as well how far things have come, because you couldn't have done that. Like, that there would be a time where you would come out with the worst recording.
Absolutely.
And I mean, we were talking about technology, but just when it works in those cases, I mean, like, it is an amazing thing to be able to just be like, I'm just going to go to the bus for a couple hours and then.
Well, years ago we were out with Kirk Franklin. I did a record for him back in like 2000 or 2001 called The Rebirth, and it was a really great record. It was a live record, and then we toured the show with Donnie McClurkin and a bunch of really incredible young gospel artists. And the drummer on that gig was a producer, and we were putting horns on a record, and so we recorded the trumpet and the saxophone parts in a hotel room. Thank goodness security never came by, because we were blowing our brains out, right? And then when we did the baritone sax, we took it in the bathroom, because it has such an, when you sing in the bathroom, you sound so much better. Same thing with playing. We went in the bathroom, put a microphone up, and recorded the baritone sax in the bathroom.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
So when it comes to playing studio live, do you have a preference? Like, do you prefer going out on the road? I feel it's a very different discipline. I feel like when you're in the studio, you cannot afford any. I mean, it has to be perfect every single bit. I guess, like, you can maybe have a little more fun on the road, or.
I really enjoy the challenges of the studio, and my studio at the house, which is an overdub studio specifically for horns, but I have a set of drums. I can cut bands in there and stuff. But I'll sit in there. I'm not too far from where Beth works. Beth works from home 3 days a week, and so she hears me play parts over and over, because I stack myself. So not only if I make a mistake do I have to play it over, but if I'm doing 4 trumpet parts, you have to play it 4 different times. I love the creativity of sitting in the studio and being spontaneous. I love playing with the guys that I play with, because they're super duper creative, and I love them because I want to spend 8 hours in the studio with them.
Right.
The road's a grind. It's definitely different, because you don't get paid for the 2 hours that you're on stage. You get paid for the other 22. In my studio, and pretty much the studio work that I do, I can sort of pick the people that I work with.
Right.
And I'm a cheerleader for them, and then they're a cheerleader for me. When you're on the road, you don't get to pick the people that you're with. On a rare occasion, they'll say, "Hey, put together a horn section."
Right.
But it's a real grind, and being away from home and my wife and grandkids and the dogs and stuff like that. I'm kind of a homebody. I really like being there, and at 4:00 every day, I get done in the studio, and I walk past my wife and encourage her gently to get off the computer, because she's not getting paid overtime, and she's like, "I'm closing it down right now." And then we go downstairs and I cook dinner and we walk the dog, and it's pretty awesome. But I'm old, so
Tour life isn't all it's cracked up to be, though, especially if you end up on those tours with someone that you're not a huge fan of, and then you're stuck in close quarters with all these people, and you just
I played with some remarkable artists. I mean, I spent 14 or 15 years with Lyle. Love it. And the band was just every night just something new and something different, and his songwriting is so extraordinary.
Fantastic.
He was a great boss. But Winona and Kirk and Martina and all the way back to the beginnings, where with Shelby and Kenny and then Michael English. It's been really, really remarkable. What I love to do is like what I did with John this past time. We went to New York for 4 or 5 days. Getting up at 1:30 in the morning or 2:30 in the morning Eastern time to do a morning television show, not my favorite thing in the world.
Fair.
I mean, until I have coffee, I have fangs and I'm kind of, you know. So waiting, sound checking at 4:30 and then waiting around till 9 o'clock to go on. Thrilling in that my mom could see me on TV, and my wife could see me on TV, and the kids and stuff like that. But doing that for 4 or 5 days, everybody's rowing the same boat. Everybody has to get up early like that, and you're all a team. I love that stuff. So those are my favorite kinds, like kind of hit it and quit it,
Right.
and make just a crap ton of money and then come home.
But sounds like a good time.
It's good. It is.
So when did studio work kind of really kick into gear for you? So obviously, you started out going out on the road. At what point was that a choice that you made to kind of not go out so much and move towards studio, or did it just was it a natural progression?
I think if the $1,000 a day gig had come up at any point in my career, I would have said yes, please.
Yeah.
But those are few and far between, and so I had a gig when I first moved to town. I was doing the Christmas show at the Opryland Hotel. It was great, 6 nights a week, sometimes 2 shows. Paid a lot of money. Paid for kind of moving here and first and last month's rent and getting established and all that stuff. And then I had like a 3-month period, 2.5-month period where I was underemployed because the Christmas show ended and we had spent all that money. Middle of January, I get a call for my very first session. So I had been here. People were like, "Oh, you won't get a session for about a year," and I had been here like 6 weeks, and I got my first call, and I was like, I scared to death. It was a TV theme song for TNN, the Nashville network back in the day, and it was a big orchestra, and it was Bradley's Barn. I was petrified because I knew the pressure. But at the end of it, and eventually when I got paid for it, I was like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do because of it's just such a challenge mentally. People who do it understand.
Yeah.
People who watch it on TV don't have as much of a glimpse of it, but the mental focus that you have to put into this to try and be. So you have a song for me, you've written a chart. You put it down on the stand. It's the first time I've seen it. Mm-hmm. And then you hit record. I have to play that song like I've known it for 20 years, and it's the favorite song I've ever played in my life on every single record because that energy that you put into it, it comes out on tape. I mean, it just comes out on the record. You can hear that joy and that you can, or the angst or the whatever you are trying to communicate. So basically, when I figured out I could make enough money doing sessions and not go on the road, that's when it changed for me because I just love it so much. I just love it. And some people just don't. They want that crowd and they want that energy and they want that immediate feedback. But when an artist, just this morning, I did a session at the studio yesterday, and I actually added some things that they didn't ask for, which can kind of get you into trouble sometimes. But nowadays you can just take that stuff and just delete it.
Right.
She was over the moon and just kept texting and saying, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, and more to come," and this and that and the other. That kind of feedback for me is just really, really wonderful. Right. And then sitting I've done sessions, especially with Lloyd, where we would play, and it was the hardest thing I'd ever played in my life. I looked at it and said, I can't play this. And then an hour later, went in and listened to it, and it was like an out-of-body experience. Like, if I heard this on the radio, first of all, I would find out who played it. And I couldn't believe that. I know I had just done it,
Right.
but I couldn't believe that I had just done it. And that just, I'm getting chills right now. It's so thrilling. And it's every day.
Right.
So it's like, yeah.
And man, something that you're so passionate about as well, to be able to step back and then hear it and just be like this is
Right?
this is it. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, and to be a part of writing, I never thought I wanted to be a writer. I'm not a songwriter. I make up goofy lyrics to songs. We mishmash stuff at home all the time. Beth is the queen. My wife is the queen of starting one song and ending it with another. Yeah, mostly the fight song for her college. She's a big Buckeye fan, Ohio State.
Okay.
She starts singing the Buckeye theme song and then ends up in Hava Nagila. I don't know how she puts it together. I don't know how she puts it together, but it's pretty awesome. So I'm not really a songwriter, but if you sent me a song that was "Come to Jesus" in whole notes and all horns playing, I could put more horns on top of it. And so I feel like that's kind of my thing. And I was on a record years ago with a guy named Joe Pace, who's another contemporary gospel guy. Really, this big, beautiful, low voice. Like when he talks to you on the phone, you feel like you're talking to God. And I wrote and arranged the horns, and it got nominated for a Grammy. And I was like, I just, it's like a pinch me moment, because like when I was in high school, I just, I had no idea how or why or what. I knew what I wanted to do. I just had no idea. And again, my 16-year-old self would have been like, shut up.
Right. And I mean, as a musician, as an artist, I mean, that is the pinnacle of, like, it's the Grammy, where else do you want to go from there? Like, because it's the recognition of all that hard work, all the years, the hours spent practicing, spent honing that craft for it to pay off and know that, like people hear it. Like, that must be.
And it's peers. So it's really cool. The voting process is peers, and so, every year when the Grammys come on, it's so funny because I prepare myself for the Facebook post. Oh, the Grammys suck this year, and the music is different, and blah 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 blah. Go back to the '60s when it was, like we were all high and we didn't know any different. And I always say the same thing. It changes. The Grammys every year, and I don't care for everything. But there's somebody who can sit in their bedroom and make up an entire record with their brother in their bedroom and then win a Grammy is, to me, a testament to them as writers and creatives and the technology that exists. Like you could be in your little Snuggie singing your vocals, man, and it's really, really amazing. But I always say the same thing. It changes when you appear, and I've never won a Grammy myself, but I have appeared on over 50 nominated and 25 winners.
That counts. It counts.
It changes how you feel about the ceremony, no matter what. Right. It just does, and I always, it's like when people talk about going on the road with a particular artist. My favorite one is, well, I don't want to mention her name, but she's very popular now. And people bust on her because, 20 of her top number one hits have the same chord progression. And I'm like, it all changes. If she calls you and says, we're doing 2 years, 40 weeks a year, and I'm going to pay you $10,000 a week, would you take the gig? And the first answer, if it's no, is a lie and is unacceptable, because almost everybody I know would go out there.
Right, yeah, right.
And contribute to, like, if you go to one of those concerts where you're playing for 60 or 80,000 people, and I went to a Springsteen concert one time when he was at the Meadowlands in the 90s, sold out like 16 shows, like gave the receipts each night, the net receipts, to the guys in the band as a tour bonus.
Wow.
Just think about that for just a minute. 60,000 people at, back then, probably $100 a ticket. So that's life-changing, right?
Yeah, that's insane.
So knowing that, but then sitting by the soundboard, with the ice-cold cooler of beers right there and watching the boss, and every single soul in the entire building singing every word. I don't care who you are, man. That is a life-changing experience. And it doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't have to be the coolest gig in the world.
Right.
You know, it's just like, it's what you make of it. And you know, I would love for her to call me and offer me $10,000 a week for 2 years and 40 weeks. That's like you pay off your house from
Right.
that stuff. You know what I mean? And you come back and everything's okay. You know what I mean? And then you tell people, like when I was with Lyle, I did a jingle. I used to do jingles in the 90s for a friend of mine who was my youth group leader at my church in high school. And full circle, 20 years later, I'm working for him. And back then you would take the song, finished song, jingle, you would bounce it off a satellite to Chicago. There was no transferring it over. It would take, overnight to transfer. And so the guy in Chicago was like, okay, tell me about this. It was a beer commercial or something like that. And he said, and Rob said, I've got Lyle Lovett's trumpet player on this. And the guy said, I don't even have to listen to it. Sold.
We're done. It's pretty high praise for someone to just hear your name and be like, all right.
No, what? Lyle's name, not my
fair.
name. He doesn't know who the heck I am, but the fact that I played for him.
Fair.
And so any of those kind of high profile gigs, I mean, it really sets you up for a long time.
Right.
Really sets you up for a long time. So I would say to the musos out there, don't be silly. Don't be silly. Take the gig and enjoy the benefits of it, and then take what you've been given, and steward it properly. Hang on to that money. We still have a little bit of money in the bank from when we were with Martina.
Right.
We called it Martina Rich. You want to go on vacation? Sure.
I love it.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome.
And I mean, the thing as well, just as a musician, is once you get established, obviously it's a lot better. But the truth is, at any point, you could just find yourself in a dip where there's no gigs. No one's calling you to go out on the road. All of a sudden, studio sessions slow down, and so like even the gigs that maybe, money aside, you're not that keen on, if you can get what you can, and everything opens doors. You never know who you're going to meet on stuff, and like you say, like just playing with Lyle Lovett, like being able to say I played with him, the respect he has. And I know that one of my previous guests, Tommy Harden.
Oh, I love Tommy.
Yeah, Tommy's I love Tommy.
Yeah.
When he first came to town, he kind of got taken under the wing of Eddie Bears.
Yeah.
And he said, just having his name and being like, Eddie's been recommending me.
Right.
He was like, I got gigs with people not even questioning it because this guy's recommending me.
Yep.
And it really... It pays off to know people, and you never know who you're going to meet in any sort of...
My first road gig was with Shelby Lynn. She did a record called Temptation, and she was an incredible singer. She still is an incredible singer, and her sister was along. Allison Moorer.
Mm-hmm.
They're just two voices of two angels, and a crazy good band. J.D. Blair was playing drums, and he eventually... played for the Canadian girl that just did a big comeback tour. What's his name?
Shania Twain.
Shania Twain. Yeah, I'm sorry, Shania.
That Canadian chick.
Right,
Anyone know?
I know, right? Golly, all of Canada hates me now. So he played with her. Victor Krause, who is Alison Krause's brother, and has played with Lyle, and good God, everybody, you know what I mean. Pat Burgesson, who was Chet Atkins' guy for a long time on guitar. He also plays harmonica, incredible musician. Rod Magaha, who is one of the best human beings I've ever known, incredible trumpet player, wonderful graphic, a visual artist. He got me my first gig with Lloyd, who I wound up doing 2,500 records with.
Wow.
Because we were on the road together with Shelby.
Okay.
But the big one, not that that's not big enough, my buddy Todd Burns, he went on to write hundreds of thousands of cues for movie and TV in L.A. He's back in Nashville now. Dennis Taylor, who passed but was an incredible saxophone. Tom McKinley, who played with one of the O'Neill Young, Okay, went on to play with Neil Young. Charles Rose, trombone player with the Muscle Shoals Horns. So fame, you know,
Yep.
all that stuff down there. His first gig with the Muscle Shoals Horns was in 1974, and it was Elton John's second U.S. tour.
Yep.
Like traveling around literally on a 747 with chefs and a bar and that's when Elton was. He was dirty. He wasn't clean yet. You know what I mean? So it was a big party. They would get off the plane, walk down the gangplank, get into a limo, warm up on the way to the show, go to the back stairs, go up, play the show, stadium. They had a beer roadie. They had like a sign where they would do this, and a hand would come out and pour more beer. And
I need one of them for this show.
Yeah, no kidding. It just kind of pops up
Let's
in
go,
the middle.
right?
Charles been playing with the Muscle Shoals Horns that long. Called me for my first session after that tour, and it was down at Muscle Shoals Sound on the river, Malaco. When I was 21 or 22, I had an R&B band, and one of my favorite songs that we did was "Who's Making Love to Your Old Lady" by Johnny Taylor.
Okay.
Horn set, the vocals were hysterically funny and well performed. The band sounded great. Some of my favorite horn parts. I'm sitting down at the studio. I didn't ask any questions when he called me. None questions. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, hey man, who are we working for? And by the way, how much are we making? And he never told me how much we were making, but he did tell me it was Johnny Taylor. I was just like, what in the world? So along with Charles is Harvey Thompson. Harvey's been with the Muscle Shoals Horns since 1965, where they would go to Fame and they were on salary. They had no idea who they were working for. They would just show up at 10 o'clock every day and they would make records all day. And then probably play craps and lose all the money they made that day, and then rinse and repeat 5 days a week. Harvey calls me like maybe 3 months after I met him and says, Vinnie C. Hey, Harv. Hey, you want to go maybe play some horns with Lyle Lovett? That's how I got the Lyle Lovett gig. So Shelby heard me at a club, hired me for the gig. The band leader at the time turned around during rehearsal and said, I don't know who you are. I know you're a new guy. But if you suck, I'm going to fire you. And I was like, okay. And so I was like, I mean, like, the whole bedside manner was not his forte, but
funny.
He turned out to be a really, really sweet guy.
And I guess you didn't suck because you ended up on
I
the
did
tour,
not.
So, and then here we are.
Right. So I'm on the band and I'm walking out and I know Shelby's there. So the band leader on that. So I was working the General Jackson 6 days a week. If I took a night off, it really cramped us up financially. I mean, it tore us up. But I got permission to do that. And I went to this club and I sat in and I was standing in the lead spot and the band leader came up and said, I don't want you to play lead on the first set. I want you to play lead on the second set. And I was like, wah, wah. So I did my little stupid, and then the second set came and during the first song, Shelby walked into the club and sat down. And she was there because that guy, the band leader, had called her and said, this is who you want on the road with you, and had saved my chops for the second set
so
I could shine. And I'm walking out and I'm kind of making it's like a teeny tiny club, and I'm making my way over, by her table, and she grabs me and she says, hey, I'll put a band together. I said, yeah, I know. And she said, I want you to play trumpet for me. I drove home that night. I swear I rolled down my window in my 1985 Chevrolet truck that was only running on 3 cylinders at the time, and I howled at the moon. It was absolutely incredible, and that is how all of that stuff happened.
It's so crazy. And I mean, the industry is so big, but it's also, everyone's connected. There's a lot of people, but everyone knows everyone, and it is, that who you know, not what you know a lot of the time. But what an amazing first gig to be able to go out on.
So stupid, man. Kenny Rogers, we opened up for Kenny. We were doing 2 shows a week. 2 shows a day, 6 days a week. I made $750 a week, and I just can't remember being more thrilled in my life. But the funny story, Kenny's gone now, but if he was here, he could confirm this. We were, Kenny loved the horns, invited us to play with him. So we're in the second week of the tour. We had just done Thanksgiving. The day after Thanksgiving, they have a Turkey Bowl.
Okay.
Turkey Bowl is American football, played in a field somewhere. We were staying at this hotel, and Kenny went and bought footballs, and we all went out there. And I said to the guys on the crew, because I was big Vin at that time. I was close to 300 pounds, and so I was going to be full-time center, because I couldn't run. Well, Kenny was right across from me, and he was trying to get to the quarterback. And I said to the guys on the crew, I said, does he want to play, or should I let him go?
Oh,
What's he do? And they're like, oh, no, kick his ass. I don't know, can I say ass? Yeah, oh, yeah, he wants you to. And so I was beating him up really bad. And eventually, like, we wind up in a pile on the ground, and he's like, Vinny, what are you doing, man? This is not the NFL, blah, blah, blah. I come into the show that night. We're playing, and Kenny's on stage after we had opened up for him, and his manager comes up on stage and helps him on with his jacket because I had dislocated his shoulder. So I'm like, holy crap, what am I going to do?
Right? He's the one that wanted to play football.
He did, and the guys on the crew are kind of going, you dummy. So later that week, Kenny had asked us to come and play with him. He used to play bass. I think it was the Kingsmen, his first band. He was just this nerdy young guy, still had the beard, kind of 60s glasses, and he played bass. Well, he wanted to play Stompin' at the Savoy with the horn section, bring us back up. And we were thrilled. So his big, giant manager comes back, and he says, all right, Kenny wants to talk to all you guys. We're in the dressing room. And we're like, okay. He said, but not you, Vinny. And I was like,
uh-oh.
I was like, I've been fired. This is the first gig I've ever had, and I know I'm going to be fired. This is awful. I sat there for what seemed like 10 hours. It was probably 5 minutes. And I'm just rocking back and forth going, oh, my God, you really blew it, man. You're going to have to go home till, blah, blah, blah. And the manager comes back, and he says, all right, Kenny wants to talk to you now that he's talked to the guys. And I'm like, shit. So I walk down the hall, and I go in, and the whole place explodes in laughter. And Kenny's kind of sitting at the front of the table like the Godfather. And he said, that'll teach you to mess with me, boy. And that was it. So I didn't get fired, thank God.
Oh,
but,
man.
just all those different, I could ramble on and bore people to death. I'm sure everybody is asleep by now that's watching this podcast.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Oh, no, those are the stories, though, that everyone who went to that show is probably like, what's going on? Like, why is this guy helping him on with his jacket? Now they know.
Yeah.
Now they know.
Yeah, they do.
It's because of you.
Well, later in the tour, then my mother, who was a huge Kenny Rogers, oh my God, just like melted when she would see him on TV. Of course, my dad was like, he's not that great. Oh, yes, he is. That beard, he's so sexy. So we were in New Jersey at this theater in the Round. It was the closest thing to Baltimore, or Salisbury, which is where my parents were living. And I invited them up, got them tickets, and then we got the VIP thing. And so we're walking up in line, and the manager, again the big guy, says, the only thing that we ask is that nobody touch his beard. He really doesn't like that. So I was like, okay, Mom, listen. Whatever you do, you can go up, you can can give him a little goose, a Christmas goose or whatever early, and don't touch his beard. She's like, okay. She's super nervous,
Yeah.
She walks up, and it's the three of us, and we're getting a picture taken. The first thing she does is reach up and just like, oh my, I've always wanted to touch your beard. I'm like, Mom! She probably doesn't remember that because 15 minutes later, I was like, Mom, you touched his beard. She's like, what? She was out of body, man. She was out. And of course, my dad's still like, Kenny Rogers. So, yeah, that whole tour was like, and I thought I was going to get fired again, because of my mom. Yeah, well.
Could you imagine that? You get fired from a tour because your mum touched his beard?
Yeah. How do you tell that story?
Right, guys, it was all going so well, and then...
Yeah, and they're all like, oh, sure, Vinny. Yeah. And one of those, yeah, so, yeah. I got a million of those goofy stories, all of which Beth, my wife, has heard 9,000 times. She's rolling her eyes right now, aren't you?
Every single one.
Oh, God. Is he going to talk about Kenny Rogers again? Yeah.
It's a good one, though. That was a good one.
Yeah, there's a couple in there like that are really good. Lyle, the first week we played with Lyle, right after Harvey called me for Lyle, we were in Boulder, Colorado. It was gorgeous. It was in the fall. The leaves were changing. I was like, this is just magical. I had no idea how much money I was making. No idea. We were kind of going out to audition because Lyle, before that, had been using 4 saxes. Now he wanted to go trumpet, bone, and sax. And so we were in this little teeny tiny playhouse that probably held, I don't know, maybe 600, 800 people. And we were doing 5 nights in a row. It was a radio thing or something like that they had out there. And the dressing room for the horns was down this really steep set of ladder stairs in the basement under the stage. So we had been rehearsing and everything was going great. When we were with Lyle, we would do like the first 45 minutes and then he would kind of peel it down to, just him and Hagen, who was the cello player.
Okay.
And then he would build it back up. So we had 45 minutes in the middle of the show where we would in-depthly talk about our performance, as we drank silly. So I got my jacket off, and again, this is Big Vin. Harvey Thompson's just about as big as a toothpick. And Charles got his feet up with his shoes off. And we're talking about how awesome we are and how we're doing so great on the show. And what do you think, Harvey? You think, because we were auditioning. Right. Do you think he's going to hire? Well, I don't know, Vinnie C, blah, 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 blah. And so at the end of the break in the middle of the show, Lyle would introduce the horns. From Muscle Shoals, from the Muscle Shoals horns, Muscle Shoals, Alabama, Harvey Thompson. And Harvey would walk out and everybody would clap. And then he would introduce me and then Charles. Well, we're down there and on the set list, we've got 3 songs left to go. Right? We're good. Talking and we hear, ladies and gentlemen, from Muscle Shoals, Alabama and the Muscle Shoals horns, Harvey Thompson. And we're in the basement, down the set of stairs. So Charles is trying to find his shoes. It was like a Three Stooges. Charles is trying to find his shoes, and we're ripping everything up. Meanwhile, Lyle has not said another word. So he's just standing there, and that eyebrow just goes up like, and the place is like, then it starts to erupt into a little bit like, what's going on? And then kind of, because Lyle's just stone-faced. He loved that. Else. Said nothing else. We go up the stairs. I'm trying to put on Harvey's jacket and he's got mine on, and so we go out on stage. Harvey's got my big ass jacket on that he can make into a triple breasted, and I'm kind of holding his over my arm awkwardly, and we walk out on stage and everybody, thunderous applause. Well, Harvey walks out, thunderous applause, and I'm like, this is my second gig and I'm gonna get fired from this one. So it was just it was really, good God, hysterically funny. We talk about that whenever we see each other because we had no way. And it turns out, as I learned more about Lyle, totally on purpose. He knew we were down there just kind of...
You wouldn't be ready, so he's like
flossing our teeth and whatnot. And, I'm sure he suspected that we were having a cerveza or two. But, oh my gosh, so funny. So very... And he never said a word to us about it. Never. He just got his little chuckle, went on to his bus, and we moved on, and we got hired, and I stayed on that gig from 93 to 2007.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, very cool.
That is, man, those, and again, I love it. I love those stories.
You see, you love it. Get it? Love it.
Love it. Hey.
It's
pun intended, right? Yeah, I totally did that on purpose. So, when you go in and you are doing studio sessions for people, when those artists then eventually tour, now, I imagine, with guitarists and stuff, I feel like you can get a guitarist to go out on the road. I mean, is it different with, horn sections? Do they tend to then go, well, these are the guys that recorded, so we're going to take them out? I would imagine it's hot. I mean, I honestly don't know enough about trumpet and that sort of area for musicians. They tend to take you out on the road rather than hire a new set of people.
I don't know how the rhythm section world works. I know sometimes that if you as an artist hire a producer, a well-known producer, they have a crew. Mm-hmm. One of the guys that was out with Lyle was Matt Rollins, and he was like a double scale, 3 a day, 6 day a week guy for 20 years. Like he really did well. But Lyle would get him to go out on the road because that was his very first gig, and Lyle just had this rapport with him, and he paid him, really well. But a lot of times, like on the John Party record I was just talking about, he used his own band on the record. Okay. It was pretty cool. So those guys are naturally kind of built into. But the last one I was telling you about with Martina, John, I was at another gig. John took me out on the bus and played the thing and played the song for me, and I was like, holy crap, loud. John likes it loud. It was amazing. It sounded so good. He said, well, we want to tour it, and I want to get the guys to play it on the record. And I said, okay, you got it. So everybody except for one guy who didn't want to go was on the record. That's easy. Like with I kind of have my fingers crossed a little bit with John Party. I'm hoping that now that he's heard his stuff with horns, that he's not going to be able to live without us. But I don't know I don't know what that looks like. So some people will, like I've got a gig coming up at the end of the month with Frankie Valli.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's playing at the Grand Ole Opry.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite gigs. The band leader is just this super energetic, jubilant human being that's like, when you see him, it's like you haven't seen him for 100 years. But then you just pick up right, So they have a saxophone player, but they hire trumpet and trombone in each one of the towns that they go to. Ah. So that's one way to do it. You got a guy from Nashville that's familiar with the material. I would book the guys. When we got there to the gig, I would talk through. We'd do a long rehearsal at sound check. They would play the gig.
Okay.
Then there's the all Nashville section, which would likely be most of the guys that played on the record, although I know a couple of them that are doing other gigs.
Right.
Tenor player is playing with Eric Church. The baritone player is really solid with the Nashville Symphony and does all the shows and has 2 kids that are just getting to be teenagers. He doesn't really want to go on the road.
Right.
So then you kind of make the next best choice, and everybody can play. Everybody who lives here can play. But you got to want to be on the bus with them for 24 hours. So that's a big factor. And then the other one would be pulling people in, some of your favorite people in from other cities. I have a buddy in Baltimore, Barry Caudell, one of my oldest friends, changed my life with a piece of music that he played me when I was a freshman in college. I love the guy. We had a band together in Baltimore. If I could, I would call him for the gig. But that would mean flying him in from Baltimore to Nashville to catch the bus, or from Baltimore to the city we were playing. So it's really all according to how much. It's not how much money the artists are making, because I think on the touring thing they're all doing pretty good. It's how much money they want to give away for your services. So that's kind of how it works. But I will generally pick the people. Everybody I know who I'm friends with can really play their horn. The key factor is, do you want to jump on a bus with them and spend that kind of time with them? And so that's really a big factor for me.
That's totally fair.
Yeah. So
of all the people that you've had a chance, with the exception of the ones you've kind of spoken about already, what would you say are kind of your highlights of your career, with records you've played on, people you've played with?
1994 was my first year that I was on a Grammy-nominated record, and we won. Actually, it was 4 that year, so I got thrown into the fire. Wow. Shirley Caesar, she's a old school gospel artist. It's just Lloyd, who I've referred to a couple times. When he listened to her when he was a kid, he thought that's what God's voice sounded like a female. And she's just this little teeny lady, powerhouse singer. That's super memorable because I remember the session. It was like really hard. And then I remember, because I wasn't thinking about Grammys or any of that kind of stuff at the time. But I remember when Doug Moffat, who's passed now, a saxophone player here in town, called me and said, "Hey, dude, we're on a Grammy-nominated record."
Just like super nonchalant.
Yeah, well, he was nonchalant about everything. That's just kind of his tone. He was monotone all the time, super laid back, great player. Love that guy. I miss him a ton. But he called and told me, and I was like, well, what does that mean? And he's like, and he kind of explained it to me because I just really didn't know, and then found out that it was 4 that year. It's pre-social media. Now it's like, the first round of the Grammys is like, if you know somebody who's a NARIS member and you have a song and you give it to them, they can submit it. Mm-hmm. And so technically you're on the Grammy ballot. But there's like tens of thousands of songs, right? And they narrow it down and all that kind of stuff. So now if somebody submits a song, they're like, my Grammy nominated record, and so it's like, it's a little bit different, for those people who don't understand the process. That was a huge one for me. I played a concert with Winona that was televised to, I have no idea how many people, but it was the first event at the Texas Motor Speedway when they built it.
Oh, very cool.
330,000 people.
Wow.
And they had fire hose cannons. Like the crowd moved. Of course, it was live, but it moved in these waves like this. Like, and I'm standing on stage. I'm nervous because I'm on TV, but I'm looking out, and you just can't see the end of the people. And it's just and they had these hose cannons that were just spraying these people because people were passing out because it was so hot. That was super memorable. My first TV appearance, my first big TV appearance, which is kind of a funny story. Again, that Beth's heard a million times, poor thing. I'll buy you lunch, honey. I love you. So my dad, when I was in high school and I was old enough to stay up till past 11 o'clock, we would watch The Tonight Show together with Johnny Carson and Doc Sammerson. Doc, trumpet player, and had a big band. And my dad, I could see him sitting in that wingback chair, one arm up with his leg crossed underneath, possibly having had a very large gin drink, possibly. And he would say, one day, boy, you're going to be on that show. And I was like, sure thing, Dad.
Whatever you say.
Have another swig. And we would watch it together. And so he called it. So that was probably in late 70s, maybe 1980. So now it's 94, and we're on tour. And it was during the Julia days. So Julia Roberts would come out, all the time. And, of course, that was right after Pretty Woman and all that stuff, And I was like, oh, my God. She was super sweet. And this dirty spot right here and this dirty spot is where she kissed me on the cheek. I cover it when I shower.
There you go.
So she was always really sweet. So we, it was a Monday, we found out, and we had like Thursday off. So we were in Kansas City on Wednesday, and I think we were somewhere in Texas on Friday. So I called my dad on Monday, and I said, hey, and this was my dad. I said, hey, man, are you still watching The Tonight Show? And he's like, nah, ever since Carson got off, I don't really care for that new guy. And I said, okay, well, in the conversation, maybe, how about if you watch it on Thursday? I told you, I don't like that guy. He's a jerk. I said, well, Dad, I think you should watch it on. Well, why should I watch it on Thursday? And I said, because I'm going to be on the TV show with Lyle Lovett. And this is what he said. Great, I got to go. Click. Hangs up the phone. I'm like, dude, you're like Babe Ruth. You pointed out to the outfield, and then you hit the ball, and it went out of the park. You called your shot, right? Very, very sort of, what the hell's going on here? And I didn't think anything of it. We get to Thursday, and it was amazing. NBC Studios, the old one out in L.A., and just thought there were still pictures of Carson, and I knew the trumpet player that was playing on the show. It was just fantastic. It was such a great experience. And we flew out there with Julia on a prop plane, 2 prop planes. I actually sat on the toilet in the back, not on the toilet, but in the toilet space. And it was a bumpy ride, man. I just thought, I knew this is it. I'm not gonna get fired. I'm gonna die. So we land and we get there and we go in and we actually snuck around the whole studio, which you're not supposed to do. Like
and now they know. And
right,
now they
and
know.
now they know. Right, you can come get me 30 years later. Right, but it was so much fun. Like I think it was like All My Children and One Life to Live and all those.
So cool.
You know, and we were like, this is the bed where the Constantines, you know, blah, blah, oh, it was just crazy. It was so much fun. And we did a little covert tour. And so I was the only guy in the band that had never done a big TV show.
Right.
Right. And I got a new trumpet that day from Chris Colicchio out in L.A. And, you know, like with any instrument you play, you know, you got to kind of fiddle around. I decided in my infinite young 29-year-old wisdom to play it that night on the show. And it was a horn feature called Penguins. So we're getting ready to start, and this blonde-haired stage manager, I can never remember his name, but he was the nicest guy to us. As we're going on, so it starts out on the drums. We had rehearsed it. It's a live taping. So it's in front of a live audience, and if you screw up, you can't go back. That's what goes on the air. Pee in my pants. My summer wool buttoned all the way up to the neck, and started on the drums for 4 bars, and then the first shot was the end of my bell and my gigantic head, which could block the light of the sun. And that stage manager goes, 5, 4. Don't worry, Vinny. It's only 40 million people. And points at us.
Oh, man.
I mean, talk about hysteric. Of course, the rest of the band, you know, laughing. And I was just like, and the only reason I was nervous, the only reason I'm ever nervous when I'm on TV is because my parents were watching. I didn't care about the other 39,999, you know, none, just those 2 people. And so we did the show, and we were leaving that night. And so we drive in limousines to the airport, and I'm expecting to get on these little prop planes. And they had hired, Julia had called Universal and gotten a Gulfstream G4, which was sitting on the tarmac with these big lights shining down on it, right? And we got on it, and there was a person that took care. They had food and booze, and Julie was sitting up front with Lyle, and we sat in the back of that plane and played craps, you know, just rolling dice like a bunch of damn degenerates. And so the end of the story is show went off great, no mistakes, thank goodness. About 20 years later, I'm at Thanksgiving with my family. We're sitting around the table. Dad's over here, mom's over here, all the kids, you know. And I'm telling this story about when Dad said, "Great, gotta go, click." And my mom says, "Oh, you don't know the rest of the story, do you?" And I'm like, "Really? 20 years later?" Your father hung up the phone and sat there and cried for 15 minutes. And I'm like...
And you never knew.
Really? You waited 20 years to tell me this? I mean, I've been telling this story. People all over the world hate you because of this. So that was but that was my dad, you know what I mean? He was really good at making money and making sure we had everything we wanted, but sort of stoic with the I love you stuff. But
I love that.
Isn't that a great story?
That's amazing.
It's only 40 million people.
Go.
Terrible.
As you play this brand new trumpet.
So
going,
mean.
What did I do?
So mean. Such a mean person. Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. So those are some of the highlights. There's a bazillion more when we go to lunch or have coffee, y'all.
I'm sure.
You know, I want to hear all about yours. I don't want to talk about mine anymore. You know.
This is it. This is my. There was this one time I was doing this podcast with this guy.
Yeah. So.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks for having
coming
me.
in.
Thank you.
This has been a blast. I love it, guys. We're going to be back next week with another episode. Trumpet Vinny.
Right on.
I'm going to link. I will link to your website, to all of your stuff. Please go check him out. Fantastic, amazing.
Thank you very much.
We're going to be back
Bye.
next week. See you later, guys. Recorded at 2300 Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Original theme music by Gary Wood.